I'm Madison Gray, and this is the Wholehearted Podcast. Hey, you guys, and welcome to this episode on becoming a well-rested woman. I hope that this can be kind of a starting place and an ultimate guide. That's what my vision is for getting yourself mentally prepared, physically prepared, and then offering you some daily and weekly and seasonal practices to get you started with resting and resting well. I think if you are familiar at all with anything I've ever shared on the internet, then you'll know that this is kind of the roots of where I feel like slow and fulfilling, simple life begins. It's a practice I think that we've lost in our modern age. I mean, anytime I run into anyone, and I know I'm not the only one that experiences this, but it's like anytime you see anyone, the response is like, hey, how are you? Or the question is, hey, how are you? And their response is, good, just busy. And so I want to speak to that today. I want to offer I don't know. I'm not an expert and I don't have it all figured out, but I think even just having these conversations about rest and how, it looks like for me as a mom to small children, I think this is a conversation that's applicable to everyone, though. It's not just for individuals even. I think rest is a practice that strengthens our families. I think rest, it strengthens our gardens. We see trees resting. Even our communities. There's so many different layers to rest. And I think it's just so beautiful. I think it's like a lost, not just practice, but art. I feel there's something really sacred to it. And right in the beginning of scripture in the Bible, God makes the whole dang universe and then he rests. And there's something like, even as you're reading that part of Genesis, it's like, it makes you stop and pause. And I think it's just kind of like a beautiful reminder that resting is never going to be something that comes natural to us, It's always going to be something that requires some intentionality, some getting ourselves in the right headspace for it, and then practically like picking a time. I think we're all very familiar with like the experience of either seeing someone else or being the person on a vacation in a perfect postcard location that's like, the resort or the spa or the beach for relaxation, and they're just having the worst time, like human stress ball. That saying like, oh, I need a vacation from my vacation is all too common. And I think that's because we don't even know how to get our nervous systems ready for rest. We think it's just gonna like happen. I don't know what we think. I think truthfully, most people in our culture just don't think about rest. It's like the first thing to go. When we feel like we're stretched too thin, it's like, well, I don't have time for rest. So anyway, I hope that this episode is just like a healing balm. I hope it's inspiring. Sorry, I don't know what that was. One of these chords. Anyways, I hope that this episode is encouraging to you and inspiring and gives you some practicals about like how to get started with rest. Even if this is something that seems maybe like a little bit, I was going to say daunting, but almost like impractical with, a life stage like having small children, for example. Or, I can think of a lot of examples for everyone in different life stages about reasons why we don't have time to rest. So let's get into it. I have like 50 pages of notes because this, again, is just something that I feel is part of my calling, truthfully, is kind of just reminding people of the wisdom in rest and inviting them back to these age-old practices that I think we were designed for. Like our souls are craving it. And so when I start thinking about it and talking about it and writing about it, I just can't stop. But I do hope that this is succinct enough for you to actually apply to your own life, and especially to have it not be overwhelming to hear and absorb this information. So given that it's winter right now, I mean, this just felt like a perfect time. And since it's the start of my podcast, I feel like, yeah, this is where it needs to begin, is with rest. By the way, I'm drinking some tea. I decided to go with an ashwagandha tea, which I thought was also quite fitting for an episode about rest. Ashwagandha, in case you don't know, is like an adaptogenic herb that helps our bodies handle stress, especially when it's mixed with other like warming herbs, like cinnamon. I don't know what else. Tea, maybe tea. Tea is warming, but it's not an herb. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other spices now and I'm blanking. Did I say turmeric? Maybe turmeric. Anyway, I hope you have something lovely to drink and you're going to just take a moment to let your nervous system relax. Even if maybe this is your rest practice for the day, is listening to this episode and just letting your soul kind of like tuck in with the idea of rest. And you're going to let these ideas just marinate. Cheers to that, my friend. Okay, so we're going to start with chatting a little bit about winter because, I mean, it is symbolically the season when we look around, it's the time when creation is taking a break. You know, like we've all heard those sayings about like, oh, well, fruit, you know, trees produce fruit in their season as according to their growth cycle. And depending on where you live, in most places, I think wherever you're listening to this, even where I live in California, the season change is subtle, but it's evident. There's definitely a change in the trees, in the weather. Nature is always in flux. And so really, I think that is where rest and talk about like preparing our minds and getting ourselves in a mindset for rest. That's where this whole idea, if we're going to really tap back into deeply soul nourishing rest, like replenishing rest, that's where it all begins. Also, it's a time, if you're into cycle syncing, it's our menstrual season as women. So it's the time where we turn inward. It's a time to just like deeply nourish, to relax, to pray, to maybe play. I think play is a big part of rest and reconnecting with ourselves, just checking in with where we're at. It's a time to take inventory too. I think this is such a fitting time. I notice so many women are so pulled towards inventorying, and by inventorying I mean like decluttering their homes this time of year. And honestly, I think that's like very primal and intuitive, to go and like kind of give your home a refresh and a restart. And yeah, I think it's actually a really good resting. Well, we'll get into this more, but has a lot to do with our environments and the way we process things. Rest is also an opportunity for us to process things, let things go. So it makes a lot of sense to me that a place that you might begin to prepare for rest would be decluttering your home and simplifying your space. I guess just like as I really zoomed out, let me just celebrate rest before we even get into the practicals a little bit more. The thing that I think, like, why does this even matter if I'm doing fine without it? Like, why do I even need to incorporate rest practices into my life? I just think there's something magical about the fact that every morning, and like how often do we miss this, but every single day we have an opportunity to start fresh. Like it's a brand new sparkly day that we get to start out on, and every week we get that same opportunity to start new, to start fresh. And then we see that in the seasons too, where things start over. And I personally I love that. I enjoy embracing that in my life. I don't think we're meant for just repeating one day after another. Like our lives just slog along and we're bored and we're just trying to get through the days. I don't think we're meant for that. And I think rest invites us back into the excitement for life, the zest for life, that like youthful energy where you're filled with ideas and you hear your intuition and you're just kind of more open and out of survival mode. So, speaking of survival mode, the question that I want you to be able to answer by the end of this episode is, how do I rest in the midst of modern everyday life? So I think survival mode is where we begin. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about exiting survival mode. So there was this study done, I don't know when, but I heard about this study that was done on trees near where I live in California. These hundreds of year old trees, they're like these incredible, awe inspiring giants. And they've lived through, I mean, all types, right? Good weather, bad weather, firestorms, winter storms, wind, rain. And then there was a study done on what would happen if the trees were forced to skip hibernation, if they were injected with, it wasn't adrenaline, but it was some type of chemical that would simulate adrenaline within the trees and force them to keep going when they needed to, whatever it is. Honestly, we call it rest, but maybe it's something different, but whatever it is, they stop producing fruit, right? They stop, and not just fruit. Most trees lose their leaves. They look dull. You wonder if they're dead. There's a tree in my yard right now is just the most luscious thing in the world. And currently it looks like a twig. There's absolutely no leaves on it whatsoever. If I didn't know anything about gardening, I might be like, should we cut it down? I think it died. But I know that it's actually like remineralizing, whatever it's doing, it's taking its time to grow even more big and lush this next spring and summer. So I think it was fascinating though, these trees that were forced to skip winter. It's actually kind of heartbreaking and convicting because what ended up happening is they died. These hundreds of year old trees, they all died within a year. One season of skipping winter, they died. So I hope that offers you like maybe um I guess just a little bit of like a warm hug. That probably sounds weird having just told you a story about trees dying. But like you are a part of creation, and I think we often forget that. We think we're like the exception to the rule on just about everything on earth, everything within nature. It's like, yeah, but I can skip that. And truthfully, it's not, it's probably your body's functioning exactly like it should. And it, and better than it should, probably, having run yourself likely far too long without taking real rest. So I hope it leaves you really hopeful for what might be different in your life. Looking back on this year, learning these rest practices, incorporating a few of them, and then being like, whoa, the most transformative thing I did this year for my every aspect of my life is learning how to rest, these rest practices. I know that's been the case for me. So, okay, there's just so much to this. It's hard to know where to even start. But let's talk about regulating your nervous system, because what I'm going to do here is walk you through like how to prepare for rest in your nervous system and in your mindset first, and give you some like specific things that you can do and try if you're having trouble even getting yourself in a place where you're ready for rest, because so much of rest actually has to do with how we prepare for it. The preparation is actually, spoiler, it's part of the rest. And, all of us, what we know of rest in our modern age is sitting on the couch scrolling, watching Netflix, um, maybe going out to a restaurant, and then sitting in traffic on the way home, going to bed far too late, but being like, oh, I got, I don't know, 7 hours. Anyways, lots of us feel depleted and don't really know what to do about it. And so I think that hopefully by approaching rest just a little bit differently, you're going to get really different results. Okay, so the very first episode that I ever had did on this podcast was with my friend Caitlin. She is the Mellow Mama on Instagram and on YouTube, and she offers lots of incredible content about respectful parenting and not just that, like reparenting ourselves, conscious living. And something I know that I've learned from her and that she talks a lot about is triggers, right? Learning how to not be so reactive, not so uptight. So that is not what this conversation is going to be about. The point I want to make is that lots of us have emotions that are stuck in our bodies. So, example, the other day my son was riding his bike outside and he had his helmet on, but he fell and he hit his face. He was kind of like on an incline in our yard and hit his face on the pavement. And even though I wasn't far away, like that sound when your kid hits their head on the ground, oh, my adrenaline just shot through the roof. I go running to him. There's blood. Don't worry, this isn't going to be too graphic, and he's totally fine. It's amazing, actually, how fast kids get. Not just heal, but like bounce back from things like that. But I was in complete panic mode, like you do when your baby gets hurt. And I kept trying to take deep breaths. But I just kept feeling like I couldn't get a deep breath and I felt really shaky. And even after he had, we cleaned up the scab or the little bit of the blood where he had the injury, it wasn't bleeding anymore. It was evident that he felt fine. I kept coming up to my husband being like, is he okay? Do you think he's going to be okay? Just these like pangs of reliving the experience and questioning myself and feeling that uneasiness that was trapped in my body and wanting to do something with it. So many of us as women, we have no idea what to do with our trapped emotions. And so I think a lot of us just have them stored in our bodies. And I promise this has a lot to do with rest. I think the first thing to do is actually start whenever you feel some emotion. There's just a reminder, nothing's wrong with you. God felt angry. Jesus wept. So can you. Like there's nothing wrong with feeling angry or feeling the full range of human emotion. It's beautiful. It's what it means to be human. I think the thing that we get stuck on is like, yeah, we want to learn how to react to them in ways that are constructive for our relationships, that are positive for us, right? That doesn't mean though that we don't need to get that experience, that trauma, that emotion out of our body in some way. And so this is like a little thing that I've started doing in order to regulate my nervous system on a daily basis. Let's just say something like the bike incident occurs, which by the way, happens almost every day as a parent. I have a list here of things that I will do in order to release these things from my nervous system. And the first one is shaking. So if you've ever seen like an antelope, okay, maybe an antelope, not many people have seen. I saw this video one time of this antelope that was being chased by a lion and then it got away, but it did this crazy thing for like 25 minutes. It would be walking around trying to eat grass like it just snapped back to its regular life. But then all of a sudden it would kind of fall over and shake, like just shake its body, shake its legs, and then just kind of like lift its head and then get back up and start eating grass. And it would just repeatedly do this. And I remember seeing this, yeah, I think it was part of a TED talk about like anxiety and human psychology and how we've disconnected ourselves from like these primal instincts where when something traumatic happens, we need to release that and not store it somewhere in our body. And I think if you have maybe a dog would be a better example. Like if your dog's ever been anxious, typically dogs will shake when they're anxious about fireworks or in the car. And I what I think is that this is actually a wise practice in order to release these things physically from our body. So something that I do is like shake my arms. And it sounds, you could just picture it. It sounds really weird, but yeah, I can actually feel my body letting go and relaxing. And I physically feel different when I am intentional about, you know what? I did feel really angry 15 minutes ago, like I need to do something. I'm going to run as fast as I can across the field by our house, or I'm going to dance to music really loud. I think we have to figure out intuitively like what we need, and this in and of itself takes practice, but maybe just hearing that this is something that I'm doing will make it seem less weird to start trying. So, let me think if I didn't mention. No, yeah. Oh, screaming into a pillow. That's another one that will help you regulate your nervous system if you feel like there's something that's just trapped. And if you feel yourself getting repeatedly triggered by the same thing, couple things I want to mention to you, or repeatedly triggered all day long, this is a sign that you need to go and release some emotions. Try shaking, try running, try jumping, screaming, dancing, singing at the top of your lungs to your favorite song. And then just check in with yourself and see how you feel. See if there's any difference. Another thing you can do in preparation for rest so that you can actually let your nervous system restore itself is do a brain dump. If you've never done one of these, just take either your journal or a blank piece of paper and write brain dump. You can put the date on it or not. Doesn't matter. The point is that you're going to just release everything, every single little thing that's floating around in your brain. You're going to give it a spot to land. And just don't stop. Don't stop until you feel like you got every single thing out on that paper. It's one of those things that it doesn't sound like it's going to be very powerful, but I have to say that in my life, this is something that is typically kind of emotional, but when I finish it, I feel so fresh and restored. And like, you know that feeling after you've had like a really long cry and then you're like, oh, okay, I can go to sleep. And then you have like the best night of sleep of your life. This is what I'm talking about. This right here. Okay. Another one quick other point about the like if you feel triggered all the time thing. This, I don't know. You can check this out. You may like it, you may not. Look up shadow work journal prompts. So shadow work is like kind of digging deep into either like your childhood, your past, things that you have, experiences you have that you have not dealt with. Like your subconscious keeps throwing it up and being like, hey, you haven't dealt with this. This is still in here. I don't feel seen. And just journaling those things out, being like, I see you, giving it time. It is definitely deep inner work. And this is where the pruning, the releasing of our leaves, that whole thing, I think that's what our brains and bodies really need. Not necessarily like in this season, but in our lives. Like it's something we need in order to do our work that sets our soul on fire, to do our work and do it wholeheartedly, to do it with everything we have, and to sleep well at night after we've spent our day like that. Okay, so now that we've kind of prepared, we've done the pruning work, our nervous systems are ready to actually relax and not just sit there like an anxious stress ball. Once we've set, like the environment can be perfect, but if you're not ready to almost like receive rest, then you will never feel well rested. So I think that preparation work is so important. So since we talked a little bit about mental preparation, let's talk about physical preparation for rest. And then we'll get into like the daily, weekly, and seasonal practices that you might enjoy and that work in my life. So physically preparing for rest. Like I said at the beginning of this episode, rest is not something that's ever going to come natural for us. It's never going to just accidentally happen. We are prone to more consumption, more doing, and less savoring, like less being. And to be honest, I feel that work is a whole another thing that we're going to talk about a lot on this podcast, because I think it is like the yang to the yin of rest. And if you're doing the work, if you're doing your calling, and I think everyone has different callings in different seasons. Not one person is not going to have one calling for their entire life. But if you are really truly doing that work, and I think it's unfortunate that since the Industrial Revolution, what work means is that you work from 9 to 5, that it's a time clock of work. And that's not what work is at all. Work, you could never prescribe the right amount of work for somebody else. Only they know, only you would know what God is calling you to this day, and how much is left that you left unfinished, and how much you stretched yourself too thin. It's unfortunate that we have this like systematic way of looking at work. But I won't get off on that tangent right now. Work is something I'm so passionate about, because work is, when we do work and we do it with our whole heart and we do it well, even if it's just like, I'm gonna look at my calendar, I'm gonna spend 1 hour today doing what God called me to with everything I have, doing it with as much discipline and creativity and diligence as I have the potential for today. The feeling you get when you enter rest after having worked like that, no one else will be able to tell you ever if you worked enough that day. Or, it's not anymore about other people. It's about you. It's about your, like that is what I feel is true balance, is when you enter rest, but you have this thing that God, is in there that you're meant to do, and you didn't do it today, or you didn't do it, I guess, authentically today, in a way that's truly you today. You didn't do it in the way that like you have this strange vision in your head. I don't know. It's going to be so different for every person, but I think every single person in creation knows what I'm talking about. Then it's going to be really difficult for you to rest. It's going to feel like, hey, the last thing you need right now is rest. And guess what? That might be true. You might feel uneasy when you're resting because you are not doing the work that you feel called to. And that is something we are definitely going to get into. That is not today's episode, but I just want to make that little aside, saying maybe your calling right now is motherhood. Could you spend 1 hour today looking at your schedule and doing that work wholeheartedly with everything you have, to the point where you're tired, like you're looking forward to rest? Then scheduling it in your day, saying, this is where I stop. This is where the work ends. And wherever it is, I'm going to say, I'm going to celebrate. I'm going to say, it is good. It is good, this work I've done today. And you're going to reflect. You're going to think about how far you've come, and you're going to just enjoy. You're going to enjoy the fruit of the work you've done. You're going to look around. You're going to relish in your home, no matter what it looks like. You're going to find things for that particular block of your day where you're like, this is vacation mode. This is savoring time. This time to this time today. I am not going to worry about comparison. I'm not going to worry about the future. I am not going to worry about the past. I'm just going to relish in the present moment. I think that is the practical way we prepare for, and we're going to get into more weekly and seasonal rest too, but having these daily rest practices where we're not just stuck in reacting, we're not stuck in forward progress, we're not stuck in just ruminating on the past. We're actually blocking out time every day. And I said an hour, but it's going to be whatever amount of time you feel is right for you. Yeah, it's an intentional choice, I guess, is the thing that I want to say about it. Okay, I do want to make one more note about preparing for rest, because something that I find is that you have to mentally prepare, you have to physically prepare, as in I'm going to look at my schedule for the day or whatever I have. I'm going to make sure that I have made a decision about when rest will occur today. That's what I mean by physically prepare. But then also we have to prepare our environments for rest. And so for me, when I'm like going towards my rest time, whether that's a daily or weekly or seasonal, there are things within my environment that make it harder for me to feel replenished, like clutter. Clutter is a huge one for me. And so I already live a very minimal lifestyle, just so that it makes it more effortless for me to, like, I don't want to have to feel like it's there's friction on my way to these rest practices. That being said, I do find that like cleaning my home, it doesn't take me very long anymore, but cleaning my home is an investment for me in my rest. Like it's an investment in my wellness. And I enjoy resting in a home that's clean. I don't really enjoy resting. I'll do it, but I don't enjoy it as much as resting in a home that doesn't have clutter everywhere and the floors are clean and the countertops are not piled with dirty dishes. So the environment doesn't have to be perfect. I find that there are daily rest practices that I'm going to share with you that don't require being in your home at all. But that is a little bit of like a aside on, like, sometimes the environment does need some preparation before you can rest and rest well. If you're going to do like a staycation at your home, for example, as like a seasonal rest practice, and you're going to just like have a bunch of things you're looking forward to doing that don't involve forward progress at all. They're just things that, like, you're going to be a tourist in your town and you're going to do a bunch of fun stuff with your kids that doesn't involve anything, I don't know, that for you and your family is like, this is our regular routine and forward progress. It's just about celebrating and having fun and being like, this is good. This is really good right now, this time of our life right now. In my case, that there would be some meal prep involved with that. In fact, for my weekly rest practice, I take a day of rest every week. Actually, sometimes I miss. It's not every single week, but I always think about what are some things this week, because it always changes. But what are some things this week that would feel really good to take a day off from? And for me, although I love cooking as a mother to two young children becomes quite monotonous for me. I cook almost all of our meals from scratch. I don't buy like packaged snacks. So there are just some days where I feel like I make 45 different snacks and 3 home cooked meals. And that's such a value for me. And there are certain meals again where that feels very therapeutic, but other times it really feels like work. And it's work that's meaningful to me, but it's very restorative to take a day off and instead maybe just watch a cooking show, for example, um, or go to my mom's house and let her cook me a meal. And I guess so, more to that point, if I want to take a day off from cooking entirely, that means that I have to do a little preparation to make that happen. And the way that looks for me is just at some point during the week, I double up on a lunch and a breakfast and a dinner. And I just make a double batch. In fact, my husband's gotten pretty good at this. So, like, just this week, he made two lasagnas. So, we have a lasagna in the freezer, and then I'll just make like extra pancake batter at some point. Um, I'll leave some fruit cut up in the fridge, and just hopefully no one eats it. Sometimes it happens, and then like on a day of rest, we'll just go out for breakfast or something like that. And then I don't feel, pressure to make sure everything is absolutely perfect on a day of rest. I feel like my mindset is the key component. We can do all this preparation, but at some point the day's going to come and then it's our choice if we enjoy it or not. And I think the more preparation we do and just the more we get used to this type of practice, type of living this way, the easier this gets, but it feels so good to take care of yourself in this way, to know that um, I do get days off as a mom. It's not true that I get no days off. I do get days off. And with just a little bit of preparation and thoughtfulness, I have days where I vacation every single week, not just that one off day, or week per year, if that. And something about that just helps me, man, talk about exiting survival mode. It's like my nervous system knows that like it's really going to be okay. Like there will be a week. In fact, there will be a time within every day that I've pre-decided, you know what? I'm resting right now. And every day that might look different. So I didn't really touch on like preparing for seasonal rest because truthfully, the only way that we seasonally rest from things is like taking a break from activities or commitments that we do all year. I don't believe in doing things all year round. So I make a conscious choice to take breaks from things, even my work, that I do all year round. Um, so that might be like dance, for example, with a child, or um, and I don't know, this gets so controversial when I talk about kids and taking breaks from extracurriculars. Um, but I believe that this is such a healthy life skill for kids to grow up learning. And I mean, I think that sometimes, I'm not saying that involvement in the community and being part of extracurriculars isn't good and healthy, especially if your kid's really enjoying that. For sure, go for it. Oh, there's a really cool bird outside my window. Um, but I also see value in slowing down and taking time with your family, in being a little bit bored, in putzing around the yard and having adventures with your siblings or your neighbor, in sitting in the kitchen watching mom cook. I mean, that's just my own opinion. But again, this is going to look different. It might look like a intentional time of vacation. We all know there's a decade difference between travel and vacation, and maybe you're going to be like, you know what? Yeah, but every year I want to have a time blocked out where I know we're taking a long extended rest. And long extended rest might be a week, it might be a month for you. And I think there's even things like you could get creative about where you're like, you know what? Something I would love to take a long extended rest from every year is dishes. I'm gonna I'm gonna get compostable paper plates for 1 month out of every single year, and I'm gonna take a break from doing dishes. So yeah, there's endless ways that you can start to think about this, but yeah, think about the things that are becoming so repetitive and um yeah, there's no rules for how slow intentional life and resting well is going to look or not look for you. So I hope that now we can get into some ideas that might get you excited about how this might look in your life. Okay, so daily rest practices. Let me find, my notes are just absolutely all over the place. Okay, some daily rest practices. So something I like to do as an intentional thing every day is disconnect from technology. It is a bizarre thing at first, like turning off Wi-Fi, not having the TV on, not having my phone by me. I do like having music on. So that is an exception that I'll make. And if you're interested at all in like this idea of removing optional technology, one of my favorite books of all time is Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. It is just one of the most profound books, I think, especially in our day and age. And I feel like I reread it every year and I get something new from it, especially as, we move farther into the future with technology. So taking time every day to just disconnect, and especially when it's a new thing, you can really feel the pangs of how weird it is to be without technology. And so if you're especially in the beginning stages, um, sometimes it's helpful to like have this time be during a commute, um, or during some other activity. Um, Another option might be like if you can invite a very vibrant friend around, and then have that be your time to disconnect entirely from technology. Okay, other daily rest practices might be reading something just for fun. This could be like a romance novel, or I love coffee table books and magazines. I don't know, like just the visuals and just the having something warm to drink and leafing through and feeling inspired. It's just such a fun experience for me. In fact, I have one of my favorites right here to leaf through on a rest day. This is Towards Rest. The subtitle is Discovering the Qualities of Rest in Our Lives of Faith by Alabaster Co. I love Alabaster Co. I will link this book and some of the other books I love from them in the description. They have great Bible studies, and this is all about moving, like it says, towards rest. And there's just like beautiful, if you're watching the video, I'll flip through some of the pages. There's like beautiful pictures. It's so inspiring. So that is another practice I enjoy. Maybe you could sit in the sun with a favorite meal and just intentionally relish every single bite. I think intimacy with your spouse is another thing that is an incredible rest practice. Often, I think, as women, we think that, I don't want to get demonetized or taken off YouTube, but pleasure is if you're like wondering if you're out of survival mode yet, if you feel like you're allowing yourself full unbridled joy and pleasure and you're not embarrassed about it, you're out of survival mode. If you're not, then you'll know you're not quite there yet. And so go back to the other practices I was talking about allowing your mind to enter this place of safety and rest. Because when you can enter into intimacy with your spouse from that place of safety and just being really present and knowing like it is safe to enter my body fully. As women, we're like the only creatures that have an organ specifically for pleasure with our spouse. So I feel that we are literally designed for it. And talk about like all the hormones that occur just naturally that are so restorative for us in our bodies. And what is more restorative than feeling like your marriage is just like you and your spouse are just on some type of wave, like you guys are just on the same page. I think, gosh, intimacy too with your spouse. there's a lot, if you're familiar at all with, again, this is kind of controversial, but Kim and Ami's work on the internet, she talks a lot about like, I mean, her work is all about intimacy and sex, but she shares a lot about how in our culture most people are having what she calls junk food sex versus gourmet sex. And I feel like you either really like her or you're like really turned off by it. But intimacy with your spouse, as she explains, it really requires, if you're going to have that gourmet type of intimacy with your spouse, it requires the glass between you being completely clean. So having these conversations, saying the things that need to be said, um, I guess getting the polarity right between you, like, oh, there's a lot to this, but when the polarity is not right, when uh, the 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 masculine and the feminine are not feeling drawn to each other, like polarity is in two magnets, when both are being like the same side of the magnet, they're gonna repel each other, right? But when there's polarity, then they're always both drawn to each other. And so anyways, long story short, when you can experience that with your spouse, I think we all have experienced this. There is like nothing that makes you feel more safe and able to conquer the world and just restored. Like everything's going to be okay no matter how crazy life gets, because things are good between me and my spouse. I feel like I'd be remiss not to mention like just a very practical daily rest practice, which is going to bed, having like a daily go to bed and wake up time. I won't get into the whole science of this, but it's only within, I don't know, the last less than 100 years that we have not had regular sleep and wake times that are decided by the sun, the circadian rhythm. And many of us feel depleted because we're up on screens way past when our bodies are tired. And so then we feel wired. We don't actually get those deep restorative, that healing sleep, which is just like the cornerstone to all health. You could be eating the best diet in the world and not be experiencing health because you are skipping out on sleep. I heard recently that like you can live like 14 days without food, maybe longer, but only 3 days without sleep. So sleep's a big deal. And if you have young children, I've been in this season. I've been co-sleeping with my children for like 6 years now. I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. My 6-year-old's in a bed in our bedroom because we only have one bedroom, but my 3-year-old still sleeps in our bed. And I've always been very just relaxed. That's my own personality. My husband and I love co-sleeping with our children. But yeah, I feel very loose about the whole, it must be this many hours. I just listen to my body and make sure when it's dark, I don't go on screens anymore. And now that my children do sleep through the night, that happened for me after my son weaned around maybe 2.5, maybe almost, I think he was actually almost 3, but he stopped nursing in the night around 2.5. And so I started sleeping through the night too. And truthfully, because we co-slept, it never felt like I was really waking up in the night ever, even when he was a newborn. So that was always just my daughter too, like a wonderful thing about co-sleeping. But now that I do have the freedom, I guess, to go to sleep when I want, oh, it's something I've been bad about, truthfully. And especially as I've been starting this YouTube channel over the last like 3 years. Sleep was something that I would just skip and stay up and edit my videos. And I started to notice I was getting gray hair. And I was like, dude, this isn't from having small kids. This is from me editing my videos until 1 a.m. and not getting enough sleep. And I could just feel it. And so I started going to bed at 8:30, which I know sounds absolutely insane because it did to me at the time, but now it is just like one of those things. I feel so much better. Speaking of periods, like my hormones came back into normal I don't know, I had been feeling very frazzled. And it was the thing that really helped heal my hormones. And I feel like, not that I lost my fertility or anything, but um, I just felt juicy again. And I get up at 5. So I usually get in bed at 8:30, fall asleep by like 9, and then get up around 5. And then, um, yeah, 5 is nice because I am a morning person. I love, like I said, like I love mornings. I love the fresh start of a new morning. And then I also just love to have quiet time to myself, which is my last daily rest practice. Having quiet time to myself. I know you have to get creative about it if you're a homeschool parent and you work from home like I do and you have small children. But the way I do it is by getting up early and I listen to the Bible. I sit and drink my tea and have time to myself to journal, to pray, to listen to podcasts. I love listening to podcasts and books, reading books, maybe going for like a walk around the block, just like at my own little pace, doing some yoga, any type of like exercise I usually do before the kids get up. So these are all things, by the way, I just want to throw in so that you don't think I'm some, I don't know. I just don't want to hide the fact that I love watching cooking shows. I think I already mentioned the cooking show thing, but I just love, even with the kids, it's like the only show we watch, other than the occasional nature documentary, like on a rest day. I love that. I love like making good snacks and then just having that time to watch a cooking show. So that is like a little, I don't think all content consumption is bad. That's just my own personal opinion. Um, but okay, let's get into some weekly rest practices now because whew, this is a big one. It's one thing to find ways every day to rest, little tiny things. It is a whole different situation to find an entire day in your week to just be and celebrate and savor and take a day off from things that you feel like are depleting. Sorry, I kind of have the hiccups. But like I said, this does take a little preparation. I feel like you can't just wake up and be like, you know what? I'm gonna take the day off today. Especially if you have young children. You cannot, there are no days off, unless you think ahead and be creative and come up with ways to gift yourself that. And you definitely can. Because if I can do it, you can do it. So things I enjoy doing on my day of rest. I like getting massages. Not every day of rest does this occur. And by the way, we do not Sabbath on Sundays. And the reason for that is I mentioned earlier that I like to rest in a home that's clean. And on Wednesdays, I have this sweet woman come over and clean my home. And I am so grateful that's something I've been able, like the deep cleaning of the home, that I've been able to now take off my plate. I will never not celebrate it. I almost cry every time she leaves. I can't even believe that it's real life, that I get to have someone help me out with cleaning the home. So we actually Sabbath the day after that, typically, or whenever it works in our schedule, because like I said, my husband and I both work from home, we homeschool. So we have this very different thing going on in our life where we kind of have no schedule unless we make a schedule. And, in your life, you might work on the weekends or whatever. And so don't feel shame about when you take your day of rest, or if maybe you take like a half day and a half day. I think that can be, I don't know, there's just no rules to it, So I want to have said that. Another thing I love to do on Sabbath day is eat. I love to eat good food on Sabbath. And so when I'm thinking about like what meals I'm going to make double of, I always make foods that are my favorite foods because like I want to savor my food on the Sabbath. There's a lot more to that. I actually made a video, hey, it was a while ago, but I'll link it in the show notes about slow food, and oh, that's a fun rabbit hole to go down. I think another thing that it's a difficult rest practice, but it's a transformational rest practice, is to unplug your Wi-Fi and leave your phone on airplane mode. Whew. Let's take a moment to acknowledge that rest can be uncomfortable. Often I think we consume and we hurry and we work because we're running. We are running from the elephant in the room in our lives. And when we stop, it's there it is, and you can't miss it. And so you might find that. And I want to have said that because that's definitely been my experience. But let me share that it's been beautiful because I feel that I've completely changed my life. And I'm so proud of the personal growth that I've had over the past 2, 3 years, even while having young children. And that's not to say that it's not still, I don't want to like idealize my rest day because as you can imagine, like I don't know, it's not like we're just like at Disneyland or something. There are still going to be hard moments within every day. And like we talked about earlier, you're still going to feel the wide range of human emotions. And you might even feel more of them, especially in the beginning when your brain is doing that whole detox thing, which I'm saying just so that you can maybe remind yourself. I hope you can remind yourself when that comes up, like, hey, this is good. This is healthy. I'm going to feel so different this week having acknowledged these feelings, let myself go through it rather than numb out too early and not let the process be the process. Okay. One other note is that if you are resting from a place of a faith practice, I think that this is like where God can meet us and like speak to us really clearly too. At least that's been my experience, is that my intuition becomes so strong on my day of rest. And sometimes it's hard because it's like, woo, I need to quit that thing, or I need to make a drastic change in my life. Holy cow. But that is where we jump out in faith though and say, God, I'm going to go for it wholeheartedly this week. And then you get to think about though, hey, I have the security though of knowing another rest day is coming and I'm going to be safe. I'll be back here again, no matter what I go for this week, no matter what I jump out in faith on. And that's something that is very consoling, at least for me. Okay, any other things I want to say about weekly rest practices? Oh, I wanted to mention that this does not need to be a day where you stay at home and stay locked up in your house. This can absolutely be a day where you hang out all day with friends and family. Wouldn't that be a wonderful restorative rest practice? Some of you are like, absolutely not, but that might change week to week too. And if you're resting with family members, I think it's important to keep communication open about what do we need this week, who needs how can we get everyone's needs met, and not just kind of do that thing where, I don't know, we just get so rigid. This needs to be something that goes with the flow, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay, and then we kind of already talked about seasonal rest practices, taking a literal vacation. I love taking vacations. However, I also love taking time to have staycations and be a tourist in my town and try different restaurants and just like really have a staycation at my house. I think the kids love it too. We'll like camp maybe in the yard or sleep somewhere that's like not our bed. And it's just different, and we're just like kind of in a fun mode, intentionally taking time off work. And it's really hard because if you're at home, it can be really tempting to like just jump back on your computer real quick or answer like one quick email. So I think taking an actual vacation can be maybe an easier place to start actually with a seasonal rest practice. But if you have kids, or maybe this is something you could just do during the week with your kids, and it doesn't need to be like a whole thing that involves the nighttime, with your husband if you're a stay-at-home mom. You could just take a home. My mom used to do this when I was a kid, we called it Home Skills Week, and it was like the week or two before Christmas. We didn't do any homeschool work that week, and we would just like do fun stuff with my mom around the house. No like sports practices, no. And truthfully, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like we scrubbed the grout between the tile of our entire house, but my mom made it like this really fun experience, and we listened to Earth, Wind, and Fire, and then we went out to lunch. And um so yeah, I think sometimes we have to think back to our childhoods too and be like, maybe it's just my spirit that I need to, like, I could make the mundane things really fun for my kids if I was in the right spirit for it. And again, let yourself, it's vulnerable to be in that like unbridled childlike joy state. I know that like when I first started doing this, I was like kind of embarrassed about what my husband might think if I just like had a Snow White moment when I opened my windows and just like had a full body reaction to it, you know, where you're just like, can't you picture Snow White when she opens the windows of her little cottage and she's just like puts her hand to her chest and like flicks her hair and the birds are chirping and she's just like so happy. I remember feeling like my husband's gonna think I am insane. But what I was surprised to find is that my husband, like, and I think men in general, they are so drawn to this feminine thing that is like unbridled joy. Like feeling just like being so happy. And even with small things like opening the windows and hearing the birds, or eating a pie, or riding with the windows down and just like screaming and like listening to your favorite music and just singing. And I can just picture my husband right now being straight faced and driving and pretending that he hates it. But I know that it's something that universally men love and are drawn to about women. And circling back to that whole like intimacy with your spouse thing and polarity, I think that is a simple thing you can do to like really restart the polarity in your marriage if you feel like you don't know where to start with it. I will link some other much more knowledgeable teachers on this subject as well if you're just kind of like, ooh, I want to learn more about that. It's very fun to learn about, and it's fun to see how immediately it can like affect your relationship. It's very exciting. So anyway, I will leave that there. Okay, there's so much more I could say about rest, but we're approaching over an hour now of me talking about rest, and I just want you to feel like this is so empowering and not overwhelming. And so maybe we'll do a part 2 in the future. But I hope that even just with a few days of this, that you're going to be glowing and people are going to be like, what in the world is going on with you? And you'll be like, dude, I'm resting. Listen, I so appreciate you spending your time with me. I didn't drink any of my tea. I guess that would have been weird if I had been making tea drinking noises, but I hope you enjoyed whatever you were doing while listening to this podcast, and I'll see you very soon for another episode of the Wholehearted Podcast.